Inspire, Heal and Empower by JACQUI TAAFFE. Chapter 1. Looking and Seeing. The man appeared at the door of my hospital room. I was 15 years old and alone and in hospital for an eye operation. Standing in his white coat, this man, who I believed was a doctor, told me he was there to examine me. Okay, I said, sitting up in my hospital gown. The man walked over to the bed and after pulling the curtains around me, told me that he needed to perform an internal examination. I felt stunned and a cold numbness ran through my body. I knew instinctively this didn't feel right. It felt really, really wrong, and I immediately challenged him. A shy, naive 15-year-old there, but my gut told me this is wrong. I asked, what's that got to do with my eye? Staring me down, he said with cold authority, it needs to be done. He told me to lie back on the bed for the examination. I felt completely sick, stunned, and a suffocating pressure on my chest. I remember feeling closed in by him, and the hospital curtains that should have protected me were instead used to hide a sexual assault by him, and that I would carry silently for the next 26 years before I started to resolve them, and it has taken me a further 11 years to unfold, heal and become empowered from the events of that day. In this book, I will share with you my story of what happened that day and its immediate and subsequent impact on me. I will also share how I finally came to speak about this event, this sexual assault, and start to look directly at that day. More importantly, I want to share with you the lessons that I have learned and the tools that I have found and used to change my story for me. I have become inspired, healed, and empowered, and I wish the same for anyone else who this resonates with in whatever way. Now, almost 37 years later, I still use the tools that I have learned over the past decade, and I see huge shifts and progress that I have been able to make with this knowledge and information. As a consequence of the sexual assault, I felt shame and I carried it silently for years. In recent years, I've been able to hand that shame back to the man who did this to me. I may never know who he was. I don't need to know that. And I certainly don't need to know why he did it, as it is clear that was his intention. I could have been anybody that day. It just happened to be me in that hospital bed. In 2014, I made a statement to the Gardaí and made a full disclosure of the events of that day. A Garda came to my home and we sat at the kitchen table. Many months later, that same Gardaí rang me to let me know that they had carried out a formal investigation in the hospital, but due to lack of documentation and evidence, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, the DPP, could not proceed with the investigation. On reflection, I had to let go of any belief that he might be found. I believed that to focus there would be a complete waste of my headspace, time and energy. It is enough for me that I can now hand that shame and everything else back to him and no longer carry the painful legacy of that day. I have empowered myself by letting go of that swamp-like figure that appeared at the side of my hospital bed, because searching for him would only be giving my power away. In looking at the sexual assault and both his and my behaviour, in those few minutes, I have learned so much about how one copes with trauma and power dynamics. And through my own journey of personal development and by using coaching tools, I've inspired, healed and empowered myself to stand up as a beacon of light. I have reconsidered labels of victims and survivors and believe we must first make the choice whether we want to be labelled or not. If so, what label would you choose? I wanted a label that empowered me, and I chose Beacon of Light because I have found that when I shine a light on silence and difficult conversations, I am empowered. When I found an organisation that was working with people who had suffered sexual abuse or inappropriate sexual behaviour whilst being a patient in a hospital, I began to understand that I wasn't alone and my feelings of emptiness were only a symptom of something I had been through. Looking at where I am now and my journey to get here, I want to be a beacon of light for others, and through my personal reflections in this book, share all that I have come to understand and learn with someone else. We must feel content in giving consent. It has also raised for me the issue of consent and the importance of seeking and giving consent. We must feel content in giving consent. If you do not feel content, you've got your biggest sign and signal that something is not right. When a so-called internal examination and breast check was performed on me before my planned eye operation, my consent was not sought. I am also left with a number of questions. Could this happen within a hospital setting in Ireland today? Do we have appropriate procedures and training in place that could prevent or at least greatly reduce the risk of this happening today? I have included an excerpt from 2019 article in the Irish Times, Ireland, 1984, a year of fierce debates and mounting evils, by Rosita Boland. I ask you to look at the prevailing attitudes and mindset of that year, 1984, and ask you to consider why it may compare with Ireland that we find ourselves in today. I am drawn to this quote in this article from the historian, Professor of Modern History at UCD, Dermot Ferret. Sometimes I think the word misogyny is overused, but it is difficult to find another word when you think of 1984 because of the level of hostility towards women and the focus on retribution. Quote from Dermot Ferret. According to the Oxford Dictionary, misogyny means dislike of, contempt for, or ingrained prejudice against women or girls. I went back to look at 1984 because it was important to me to get a sense and feeling of that time and how things might have been dealt with. The above named article spoke for itself, which I will read in a moment. It's incredible to read it and to get somewhat of an understanding of the mindset then. It's frightening to me, actually, that I have no recollection of the above, but then I was only 15 years old. Reading this article gives me a sense that I would have had no opportunity to get to the truth at that time. Looking at the old newspapers of 1984, it's like looking at another world, another space and time, a place of deafening silence. In getting support from the organisation Dignity for Patients, I know I am one of many and that I deserve, as they do, to be treated with dignity and respect. In learning lessons from this, I choose to break my silence and be a beacon of light and shine a light on my own difficult and dark experience. I have found my own inner power, and I hope that this book can help you to find yours too. No matter your age or how long ago something might have happened that interrupted and interfered with your life.